They need you to leave the building now, Mr. Webb. My boss didn't lower his voice. He wanted everyone in that hallway to hear it. 12 federal officials, 4 state representatives, every single person who flew in from across the country to watch us sign a $1.9 billion infrastructure contract. And my boss decided this was the moment to put me out to pasture. I'm Marcus Webb. I'm Femtiophira. I've spent 22 years building Creston Engineering Group from a mid-sized regional firm into the most trusted infrastructure contractor in the Northeast. Bridges, water treatment plants, highway systems, the kind of work that doesn't make headlines unless something goes wrong. My career was built on the fact that nothing ever went wrong. But right now, standing in the marble lobby of the federal building in Washington, D.C., I could feel every eye in that corridor landing on me. And my boss's son, the new executive vice president, 34 years old, Stanford MBA, never driven a nail in his life, was smiling like he'd just won something. Here's what he didn't know. I let him win because I needed him to walk exactly where he was standing. Let me back up. 22 years ago, I was a junior engineer with a civil engineering degree and a chip on my shoulder. My father was a pipe fitter. My grandfather poured concrete for the interstate highway system in the 1960s. I understood what it meant to build something that had to last. Not last until the quarterly earnings report. Last for 100 years. I joined Creston when it was 30 employees in one office. The founder, my boss's father, Richard Creston SR, was the kind of man who showed up to every job site in the same pair of steel-toed boots he'd worn for 15 years. He didn't talk about vision. He talked about load tolerance and soil composition and what happens to a bridge deck after 30 winters of freeze-thaw cycles. I learned everything from him. Not just engineering. The relationships. The slow, patient work of becoming the person that government agencies call when something matters too much to gamble on. He retired 4 years ago. Handed the company to his son. Told me privately over a glass of bourbon that he trusted me to keep the standards. I told him I would. I didn't know then how hard that promise would be to keep. My boss's son, I'll call him Chad because that's his name, arrived with what I can only describe as aggressive enthusiasm for everything except the actual work. The first month, he rebranded the company logo. Second month, he moved us to an open plan office because he'd read an article about collaboration. Third month, he started talking about disrupting the infrastructure sector. I once heard him tell a room full of clients that infrastructure was fundamentally a digital challenge. The project manager sitting next to me looked like she was trying not to cry. For 2 years, I stayed quiet, did my job, kept the contracts coming in. When the Federal Highway Administration called about the Interstate 78 Corridor project, the biggest public infrastructure contract offered in the Northeast in a decade, it was my phone that rang first, because it was my relationships they trusted, not the new logo. The bid process took 14 months. I led every technical review, drafted the compliance documentation, sat in meetings that stretched past midnight, going line by line through federal specifications. Chad flew in for the final presentation, stood at the front of the room for 20 minutes, and took the credit when we won. I sat in the back. I'd been in this industry long enough to know that wasn't the last indignity. It wasn't even the worst one yet. 6 months before final contract signing, I noticed something shifting. Small things at first. My name disappeared from the executive briefings. I started getting carbon copied on emails instead of addressed directly. Then the new hire appeared. My boss's son brought in his college roommate, 31 years old, background in real estate development. Given the title of Chief Infrastructure Strategist, the man had never once submitted a compliance filing to a federal agency in his life. Couldn't tell you the difference between an EAS and an EA, but he looked great in presentation decks. I knew then what was coming. I just didn't know the exact timing, so I started preparing. Here's the thing about federal infrastructure contracts. They're not like private deals where a handshake and a revised scope of work can paper over a personnel change. The federal government takes qualified personnel requirements seriously, especially on projects involving critical public infrastructure, bridges, tunnels, water systems. When you bid on a contract of this size, you list your key personnel by name. Those names are evaluated. They're part of why you win the bid. I went back and read our winning technical proposal. My name was listed as Principal Engineer and Project Technical Lead, not Creston Engineering Group. Me, Marcus Webb, P. My professional engineer license number. My signature on the certification documents. When a contractor changes a key personnel designation after award without prior written approval from the contracting officer, that's a contract compliance issue. The kind that can trigger a show cause notice. The kind that can void the award entirely, depending on the agency and the situation. I didn't write that clause. It was already in federal acquisition regulations. I just made sure I understood exactly how it applied to our situation. The second thing I did was quieter, more personal. Over the previous year, I'd built relationships with the key government stakeholders managing this contract. The contracting officer, a woman named Patricia Holden, who had spent 27 years in federal procurement. The regional administrator for the Federal Highway Administration. 3 state infrastructure directors whose jurisdictions were directly affected by the project. These weren't just professional contacts. I'd been in the field with them, walked job sites in the rain, sat with them in community meetings where local residents were angry and scared about construction near their homes. I'd driven 3 hours on a Tuesday morning to be present when the regional administrator needed someone with technical authority to answer hard questions. You don't build that kind of trust by showing up to ribbon cuttings. You build it by being there when nobody's watching and nothing looks good on camera. I called Patricia Holden 8 months before signing day. Not to discuss anything specific. Just a routine check-in. The kind I'd been doing for 2 years. But I made sure she knew that as far as I was concerned, every technical commitment in our bid proposal came directly from me personally. My standards, my accountability. She said she appreciated that. She said it in a way that told me she'd remember it. I also did something I'd never done before in my career. I documented everything. Every meeting where I caught an error. Every revision I made that kept the compliance package intact. I kept a running log. Dates, times, descriptions. Not because I planned to use it as a weapon, but because something told me I might need to prove that what I'd built couldn't simply be erased by a title change on an org chart. My sister called me around that time. She could always tell when something was wrong just from how I sounded on the phone. I didn't tell her the specifics, just said there was some politics at work. She said, "Marcus, you've been building things your whole life. They can replace your title, but they can't replace the foundation." I thought about that for a long time. 3 weeks before signing day, my boss's son called me into his office. He had the kind of office that told you everything you needed to know about a person. Expensive chairs, one framed magazine cover on the wall where he was quoted about the future of smart infrastructure, and a desk completely clear of anything that looked like actual work. He told me that in the interest of positioning the company for the next generation of growth, he was transitioning me to a senior advisory role. His college roommate would assume day-to-day leadership of the Interstate 78 project. He said I'd be compensated fairly and that my legacy at the company was secure. He used the word legacy 3 times in 4 minutes. That's what people say when they want you to feel honored about being pushed out. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, just nodded and said I understood. He seemed almost disappointed that I didn't fight back. He'd been expecting a confrontation he could win. What he didn't know was that I'd already sent one email the night before to Patricia Holden, professional, factual, flagging that I had concerns about a potential personnel change affecting my role as principal engineer, and that I wanted to make sure any transition was handled in full compliance with FAR 52.215-13, federal regulation governing key personnel and cost reimbursement, contracts. I didn't have to explain what that meant. Patricia had been in federal procurement for 27 years. She knew exactly what it meant. Now, I'm standing in the marble lobby of the federal building. 12 federal officials, 4 state representatives. The signing ceremony for a $1.9 billion contract is 15 minutes away. And my boss's son just told a room full of them that I won't be needed for the ceremony, that the company has moved in a new strategic direction, that his colleague would be taking point from here. His colleague smiled and extended his hand to the room. Smooth. Rehearsed. The smile of a man who'd been told he was about to step into history. I picked up my briefcase. The leather was scuffed from 2 decades of job sites and government offices. I took one slow breath. Then I started walking toward the elevator. I didn't rush, didn't make a scene. I just walked, and as I walked, I noticed something happen. Patricia Holden stepped away from the group. She crossed the lobby in measured strides and caught my arm quietly. Her voice was professionally neutral in the way that meant exactly the opposite underneath. Mr. Webb, I need a moment with your company's legal counsel before we proceed. Would you mind staying in the building? I told her, of course. I found a seat in the lobby alcove, opened my briefcase, took out a legal pad, waited. Inside the conference room down the hall, I couldn't hear the conversation, but I'd been in enough federal buildings to know what a contracting officer looks like when she's identifying a compliance problem. Measured voice, deliberate pacing, the specific stillness of someone who has institutional authority and knows how to use it without ever raising her voice. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. My boss's son came out of the conference room first. His face was the color of copy paper. He saw me sitting in the alcove, and for a moment I think he genuinely couldn't process what he was looking at, like a man who'd pushed over the first domino and suddenly realized he was standing in the middle of the row. He crossed the lobby, sat down, across from me without being invited. His voice was quiet for the first time I could remember. What did you do? I looked up from my legal pad. I didn't do anything. I just know how federal contracts work. His college roommate came out next. He wasn't smiling anymore. Patricia Holden followed. She walked past both of them without stopping and came directly to where I was sitting. Mr. Webb, I'd like you to join us in the conference room. We need to clarify the key personnel situation before we can proceed with execution. I stood, buttoned my jacket, followed her down the hall. What happened in that conference room over the next 90 minutes was the quietest dismantling I have ever witnessed. No shouting, no accusations, just the slow, methodical process of a federal contracting officer explaining, in precise language, exactly what the regulations said and what the consequences of non-compliance looked like. The winning bid named me as principal engineer. The technical evaluation had specifically cited my qualifications and my project track record as a key factor in the award decision. Federal acquisition regulation required written government approval before substituting key personnel. No such request had been submitted. No approval had been granted. Furthermore, Patricia noted, the certification documents embedded in the compliance package bore my professional engineer license number and my seal. Those certifications were legally tied to my credentials. They couldn't simply be reassigned to someone else's name. That's not how professional engineering licensure works. That's not how federal infrastructure oversight works. If the agency proceeded with contract execution under the current personnel arrangement, Patricia said, they would be doing so with an unresolved compliance discrepancy. The agency couldn't accept that exposure. The agency would need to issue a cure notice and pause the signing until the key personnel matter was formally resolved. A cure notice. That's a formal government notice that a contractor has a problem that must be fixed, or the award could be rescinded. It goes on record. Other agencies see it. It follows a company. Chad's lawyer tried to argue that the personnel change was internal and operational. Patricia listened politely and then repeated, word for word, the relevant regulatory language. There was nothing to argue with. It wasn't her interpretation. It was the federal code. I sat quietly at the side of the table while all of this unfolded. I'd been in enough technical review sessions to know that the best thing a person can do when the facts are already doing the work is stay still and let them. The state infrastructure director from Pennsylvania, a man named Ron Price, who I'd walked job sites with twice in the past year, leaned forward at one point and asked Chad directly, who will be the qualified, responsible engineer signing off on the technical deliverables for this project? Chad gestured to his colleague. His colleague gave a confident non-answer about team capability and aggregate expertise. Ron Price didn't look satisfied. He looked like a man filing something away. He glanced at me once. Brief. Enough. By the time Patricia called a recess, the energy in that room had changed completely. The federal officials gathered at one end of the table, speaking in low voices. The state representatives exchanged looks. My boss's son sat very still in his chair, which was something I had never seen him do in the entire time I'd known him. His college roommate had taken out his phone and was staring at it without apparent purpose. I walked down the hall to get a glass of water. I took my time about it. When I came back, Ron Price was waiting in the hallway. He reached out and shook my hand. Firm. Steady. The way men shake hands when they've decided something. Marcus, For whatever it's worth, this project needs the person who actually built it. He said nothing else. Went back into the conference room. The recess lasted 40 minutes. I sat in the lobby and reviewed my notes. My phone buzzed once my old mentor from the early days of my career, who'd heard through the industry grapevine that something was happening in Washington today. His text said 3 words: hold your ground. When everyone reconvened, Patricia Holden addressed the room. The agency had consulted with its legal team. Given the key personnel discrepancy and the compliance implications under the relevant acquisition regulations, the agency was prepared to proceed with contract execution only if Marcus Webb remained designated as principal engineer of record for the project duration. Any personnel change of this nature in the future would require a formal substitution request, adequate advance notice, and agency approval. She looked across the table as she said it. Professionally neutral. Completely clear. Chad opened his mouth. His lawyer touched his arm. He closed it. That's the thing about 22 years of doing something right. It doesn't disappear because someone decides it's inconvenient. It becomes load-bearing, and when you try to remove it without understanding what it holds up, everything starts to crack. We signed the contract that afternoon, my name on the technical signatory line, right where it had been in the winning bid. Chad didn't say a word to me on the way out of the building. His college roommate disappeared before the handshakes were finished. I stood on the steps of the federal building and let the January cold hit me full in the face. Felt like something clean. My phone rang before I'd reached the bottom of the steps. Ron Price. Marcus, the Commonwealth is bringing a secondary assessment project to bid next quarter. Similar scope. Similar requirements. I need someone I can trust on the technical side. Somebody who was there from the beginning and knows what those documents actually mean. I want to talk to you about being engaged directly as a prime technical consultant, not through Creston, through your own shop. I stopped walking. My own shop. I'd never seriously considered it before. Had always thought of Creston as home, but standing there on the steps of a federal building where I'd just watched 22 years of work hold firm against a direct attempt to erase it, I realized something. The thing I'd built wasn't Creston Engineering Group. Creston was just the address. What I'd built lived in relationships that predated every logo change and every reorganization and every MBA who'd shown up with a vision deck and a disruption strategy. I told Ron I'd call him by end of week. Before I reached my rental car, Patricia Holden found me in the parking structure. She'd done something unusual, walked out of her own building and come after me in the cold. She wasn't the type, which meant she'd decided it was worth it. She said it simply, the way she said everything. We've worked with a lot of contractors over the years, Mr. Webb. What makes this project work is the person who knows where the bodies are buried in the compliance documents. I want to make sure that person is still on the other end of the phone when we need them, whatever arrangement makes that possible. I thanked her. She nodded once and walked back toward the building. That was the whole conversation. In 27 years of federal procurement, Patricia Holden had learned that the most important things don't require a lot of words. I sat in my rental car for a few minutes, didn't start the engine right away, looked at the gray January sky through the windshield. My father used to say that the difference between a building that lasts and a building that doesn't has nothing to do with how it looks from the outside. It's about what's underground. The foundation work nobody ever sees. The pilings sunk deep enough that even if everything above grade got replaced tomorrow, the ground underneath would still hold. I'd spent 22 years doing foundation work. I just hadn't known that's what I was doing. Thought I was building a career. Turns out I was building something harder to move. I incorporated Webb Technical Consulting 9 weeks later. Small firm, me and 3 colleagues who'd worked under me at Creston and had watched the same things I'd watched over the last 2 years. We didn't have a marketing budget or a rebranded logo. We had a track record and a short list of people in federal and state procurement who knew exactly who to call when the project mattered too much to hand to someone impressive on paper. Ron Price's project came through. We won it. We also picked up a secondary contract through the regional administrator for the Highway Administration, who'd been in that conference room the day of the signing and had seen how the technical accountability question played out. The first full year in business, Webb Technical Consulting billed more in consulting fees than I'd earned in my last 3 years at Creston combined. The second year, we expanded to 6 staff. Patricia Holden referred us to 2 additional agencies. We didn't pitch them. They called us. And Creston Engineering Group? I heard from a former colleague that Chad's college roommate left the company 6 months after the signing. The Interstate 78 project ran into compliance issues on the first technical deliverable. Corrective action required. Federal oversight increased. The kind of thing that happens when you replace foundation work with presentation skills. Last I heard, Chad was still at the company, but Richard Creston SR had come out of retirement to attend a board meeting. Nobody told me what was said at that meeting. They didn't have to. I'm not in the business of watching other people fail. That's not why I'm telling this story. I'm telling it because of something my sister said when I called her the night I got back from Washington. I'd told her the whole thing, the lobby, the conference room, Patricia, Holden, Ron Price, all of it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You didn't win today because of some regulation. You won because you've been doing the work honestly for 22 years and people noticed even when you thought nobody was looking." I thought about that for a long time. Here's what I know now that I wish I'd understood earlier. Influence in this industry, real influence. The kind that holds when someone tries to pull it out from under you, doesn't live in your title, or your corner office, or your spot on the organizational chart. It lives in the problem you solved at midnight that nobody else knew was a problem. The compliance issue you flagged before it became a crisis. The government official you drove 3 hours on a Tuesday to support when they needed someone with technical authority in the room. Those aren't transactions. They're deposits. And they accumulate in places that don't show up on a balance sheet until the moment someone tries to remove you and discovers that what they thought they were moving was actually load-bearing. Chad thought he was replacing an employee. He was actually trying to remove a foundation wall. You can swing a sledgehammer at a foundation wall all day long, but if it's holding the building up, eventually the building lets you know. I signed the last page of our third federal contract last spring. My own name at the top of the document. My own seal, not buried in footnotes. Standing clear at the signature line, Ron Price was at the table. He said nothing during the signing. Afterward, he handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it later in the car. It was a printout of the original winning bid technical summary from the Interstate 78 procurement. My name highlighted in yellow. At the bottom, Ron had written one line in his handwriting. "This is why we're here." I put it in my briefcase. The same one I'd carried into that federal lobby on that January morning when my boss's son decided to make an example of me in front of every person in that room. He made an example, all right, just not the one he intended. Sometimes that's how it goes. The person they try to erase turns out to be the only reason the whole thing worked in the first place. And when they find out publicly, in a federal conference room with 12 officials and 4 state representatives watching, there's nothing impressive about it. There's no drama. There's no speech. There's just the quiet weight of 22 years of honest work sitting down at the table and refusing to move.
Some days feel off. Like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, a little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I'm freezing, I'm bleeding, slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile, every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here, maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.